In the Maasai tribes of Kenya and Tanzania, cattle aren't just important, they're the backbone of the entire culture. They are used as currency and a status symbol. The more cattle you have, the more respected and wealthy you are. This is because historically, the cattle have provided all of their food, eating the meat, drinking the milk, and even the blood. This diet was very high in saturated fat, and these people took in around 3,000 calories a day. I had the pleasure of visiting Kenya a few summers ago. I met a well-respected man who owned hundreds of cattle. I asked him, "Doesn't the amount of saturated fat and calories you eat concern you? Won't you get heart disease?" He responded to my question with one of his own. "What the hell is saturated fat? Who is calorie? And why are you making up diseases?" I wouldn't bother to describe what these arbitrary labels were. On the other side of the spectrum, there are the Tukisenta of Papua New Guinea. These people rarely eat animal food, but will occasionally feast on chicken and pork. They get upwards of 90% of their daily calories from sweet potatoes alone. Judging from what we learned from the Maasai, this high-carb, low-fat, and low-animal food diet must be unhealthy, right? Well, no. They are also free of chronic disease. These diets couldn't be more unlike the other, yet the outcome is the same: no chronic disease. So, what's going on here?
Before we get into the video, we want to tell you about Carnivore Aurelius' beef liver crisps. Conventional beef liver is the most nutritious food on the planet, but it tastes terrible and it takes time to prepare. Now you can get nature's original superfood ready to eat and it actually tastes good. With just 3 simple ingredients, the crisps are convenient, high in protein, and loaded with unique and bioavailable vitamins and minerals. Go check them out using the link in the description.
In America, it's clear that chronic disease continues to rise. Why is this? According to the almighty CDC, it is for 4 reasons: excessive tobacco use, lack of exercise, excessive alcohol consumption, and poor nutrition, defined as diets low in fruits and vegetables and high in sodium and saturated fat. So let's take a look at how we've been doing with tobacco use. Clearly this is... Oh wait, our tobacco use is down. Well, surely if we look at exercise... Oh, I guess we're actually more active now than ever. Alcohol, though? Yeah, as you can clearly see. Wait a minute. If we look at nutrition trends, we see that Americans have actually been eating more fruits and veggies, less sodium, less cholesterol, and less saturated fat, yet we're sicker than ever. Listening to massive, money-hungry globalist organizations won't get you healthy or make you live longer. It will only fatten their pockets. So if they're lying, then what really is the basis of a healthy diet? People nowadays get too caught up in the nuances of what the perfect diet is or should look like. The truth is, there probably isn't a perfect diet at all. It isn't the amount of carbs, fat, and protein that make us sick. It isn't the amount of animal or plant foods. No, the defining characteristic that determines whether the food you eat will lead to longevity or disease is the inclusion or exclusion of processed food. These foods, made by the elites who have twisted science and created cheaper versions of real food, have sabotaged the Western diet, while blaming the consumers for their lack of willpower. I want you to look at something real quick. This is the caloric breakdown for obesogenic rat chow. This is a diet they feed to rodents to induce obesity and metabolic syndrome in a lab setting. Here's the standard American diet. Pretty similar, wouldn't you say? But what about calories? Americans eat, on average, 2,200 calories per day, just 200 over the recommended 2,000 per day intake. But as we saw, the Maasai eat well above that and don't suffer from disease. Just think about it. In a human population eating real, non-processed food, should we have to think consciously about how much food to eat? No, that doesn't make any sense because throughout the vast majority of human history, caloric scarcity has been the issue, not caloric surplus. We are designed to intuitively know how much to eat. If the food you eat makes you fat, sick, and wanting to eat more, then it's not your fault for being a glutton. It's the food you're putting in. Processed food is the problem, not the people. Processed food consists mainly of 3 major components: refined glucose, refined sugar, and seed oils. Each one of these hacks your innate ability to perceive how much to eat, and each one of these induces chronic disease, mainly by making you insulin resistant. If we take a look at how processed food is digested, we can see clear abnormal physiology that is implicated in modern disease. In the gut, there are multiple mechanisms that coordinate a hormonal response to food. When food reaches the stomach, GIP is released to signal the secretion of insulin. Then in the upper intestine, GLP is released with similar action. As the food reaches the end of the small intestine, PYY is released, signaling satiety. When whole food goes through this system, everything works out as it should. However, with refined food, the story is different. Refined food is digested and absorbed rapidly in the upper digestive tract. This means by eating a refined carbohydrate or oil, the body releases a ton of GIP and GLP to signal insulin secretion. But since the food doesn't make it all the way to the end of the small intestine, the PYY release is much lower. All this means is more insulin and more hunger. That's already a recipe for disaster. This is something they all have in common, but each of the three components of the unholy trinity have their own unique effects. First off, we have refined carbohydrates. Complex carbohydrates like the sweet potatoes that the Tukasenta eat are starch chains of glucose and fiber. If you take out the fiber and break down the chains of glucose so that you're essentially eating pure glucose, you have the type of carbohydrates in processed food. Typically, when carbohydrate is consumed and digested, blood glucose begins to rise and the body secretes insulin, a hormone to help us put this energy into cells for use. This causes blood glucose to return to normal levels, and on with your day you go. The breakdown of these carbohydrates and the inclusion of fiber make this all happen at a pace the body is capable of handling. What about when the carbohydrate is refined? No bonds to break, no fiber to slow down the glucose entering the bloodstream, so your blood sugar doesn't just rise, it spikes. This requires a greater load of insulin to come in and pull all this energy out of your blood. Only one problem. This spike of insulin makes your blood glucose dip to below normal levels, and it does the same to your free fatty acids. Now you have very little fuel in your bloodstream, and your body senses this and makes you hungry again. This cycle repeats, and you are locked into either eating every few hours or dealing with the hunger. But as I'm sure you could guess, most people choose the former. Not only this, but now you have to eat enough to get your blood sugar back after the abyss it was in, so you eat even more. Your body sees this cascade and starts to go into panic mode. Stress hormones become elevated and you become addicted.
One area of the brain lit up like a laser. This is the nucleus accumbens. Nucleus accumbens, and this occurred in every subject. I've never done a nutrition study in which every subject responded the same way. So we had very high statistical power to take into account comparisons throughout the brain. Nucleus accumbens is considered ground zero for the classic addictions of cocaine, heroin, abuse, alcoholism. It's the center of the dopamine striatal pleasure and reward system.
The culmination of you now being constantly hungry and craving more refined carbs is that you are now routinely spiking your insulin above normal levels in a continuous cycle. We know that persistently high levels of insulin actually cause insulin resistance. Not only this, but the postprandial hyperglycemia is a hazard in itself. There is something called the mean amplitude of glycemic excursion, or MAGE, which essentially is the glycemic impact but takes into account the time it takes to get the blood sugar back to normal. High MAGEs have been shown to be an independent risk factor for diabetes and cardiovascular disease. This is because acute hyperglycemia overwhelms the body's ability to burn through it all through the typical pathway, so it diverts some of the load into another pathway. This pathway requires the use of a molecule called NADPH, which is needed to recycle glutathione, the master antioxidant of the body. This leads to more oxidative stress and inflammation, two things that are synonymous with Western chronic disease. Thus, the first part of the unholy trinity does its damage, but it gets worse, much worse. Next up, we have sugar, otherwise known as the devil's nectar. Fructose gets metabolized exclusively by the liver and signals insulin resistance in the liver and can cause fatty liver disease as well. Studies show that giving people refined carbs in the form of refined glucose or refined sugar results in hepatic insulin resistance and fat gain. However, one intriguing study suggests that the effect of fructose is even more pronounced. Robert Lustig, one of my personal heroes and a man on a mission to get people to stop eating sugar, conducted a study on obese children. The intervention was simple: swap refined sugar for refined glucose. The results? After just 9 days, the children didn't lose any weight, but markedly improved their insulin sensitivity. 9 days.
9? 9? Wow! You showed me.
Granted, they were still insulin resistant, so simply swapping the cereal for a bagel isn't enough, but it goes to show that fructose from sugar is even worse than refined glucose. Dr. Lustig also studied the effects of fructose versus glucose on glycation. Glycation is the breakdown of proteins by carbohydrates and can gradually deteriorate the function of several systems in the body. You know how you get tested for hemoglobin A1C? That's a hemoglobin protein that has been glycated. This can happen with persistent high blood sugar, but the process actually happens 7 times faster with fructose as opposed to glucose. These proteins are called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, an appropriately named acronym since they are considered hallmarks of aging. For example, when you see someone with dark spots or very wrinkled skin, that is an accumulation of AGE skin proteins. These AGEs are also highly correlated with many Western diseases. Finally, the last component of the unholy trinity: refined, bleached, and deodorized industrially produced vegetable oils. I saved the best for last. Look, I hate to beat a dead horse here, and we've already made like 1,000 videos on how bad vegetable oils are, so why am I talking about it yet again? Because they're so inhumanely toxic yet continue to go under the radar. It's pretty much common knowledge that refined carbs aren't great, yet vegetable oils are still being recognized and advertised as healthy.
They're just making stuff up, okay? All right.
These oils are high in polyunsaturated fats, specifically one called linoleic acid. We've talked about how vegetable oils lead to numerous diseases here, and the long-term trials proving that they cause heart disease in this video. We also discussed how they lead to insulin resistance a bit here, but that just scratched the surface. When saturated or monounsaturated fats are eaten, they get taken up by all kinds of different cells, one of which serves as a buffer, your fat cells. Your fat cells are designed to take up some fat at a meal, but still leave enough for the rest of the body. At a certain point, the fat signals that it is full for the time being and stops taking up more. However, polyunsaturated fats do not signal this properly. They don't tell the fat cell to stop taking in more fat. We can see from this study that the average American's fat tissue has increasingly gone up since the advent of seed oil. Other studies have shown that the proportion of linoleic acid in the fat of obese people is significantly greater than that of lean people. This is because while polyunsaturated fats are essential nutrients, we only need a small amount. They should be looked at as vitamins. You aren't supposed to store them or burn them for energy. When you consume highly concentrated sources of linoleic acid, your body has no choice but to treat it like it would any other fat. Since excess linoleic acid consumption causes the body to divert more fat into storage, the rest of the body is starved for fuel, resulting in more hunger.
You took my only food! Now I'm gonna starve!
This study compared the food intake of a meal with refined potato starch with either canola oil or butter, and found out that the canola group ate around 400 calories more.
But I'm not done yet!
You ever smoke weed and gotten the munchies? Actually, don't answer that. I know you have. That happens because the active ingredient in marijuana is tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC. This activates the cannabinoid receptors in your brain to stimulate appetite. However, this is a drug, so it mimics the effect of the endogenous endocannabinoids that you naturally produce. You know what else stimulates the endocannabinoid system? Seriously, I want you to just take a wild guess as to what does this. Did you guess vegetable oil? Of course you did, and of course, you are correct. This study fed mice varying levels of linoleic acid in the diet, and the mice eating the high linoleic acid diet not only got fatter, but they also had significantly higher levels of the endocannabinoids 2-AG and anandamide. These compounds act on the same receptors that THC does. I will repeat that again. Eating vegetable oil does the same thing to your appetite that smoking weed does. Only difference is that if you smoke weed, you aren't putting yourself at an elevated risk of chronic disease. Funny how the food conglomerates want you to believe it's all your fault for eating too much. Finally, a peroxidation product of linoleic acid, 4-HNE, causes fat cell dysfunction and insulin resistance. Peroxidation of this fat not only requires linoleic acid itself, but also excess reactive oxygen species, which you'll get plenty of by eating refined carbs and sugar. It's almost like some kind of ruthless transnational elite got a group of people together and asked, how can we induce the most chronic disease possible in our food to appease our big pharma overlords? And they absolutely nailed it. Let's end the dietary dogma. Whether you're paleo, keto, low carb, high carb, whole foods, plant-based, carnivore, or whatever, you're all on the same team. That team is the people against processed food. And that's something I think everyone can agree on.
Look at them eating that garbage. It's disgusting.
Well, except a certain other group of people. Don't let them fool you. Subscribe to our channel.